Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into self-defeating behavior.
Okay.
And we're using this book called Get Out of Your Own Way by Dr. Mark Goulston.
Sounds interesting.
He was a psychiatrist for 20 years, so this book is like full of all of his insights.
Wow.
You can kind of think of it like a roadmap for those times when you're like your own worst enemy.
Yeah, like when you get in your own way.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy how often those behaviors start as like ways to protect yourself, but then they just become these like ingrained habits.
Right.
But the good news is just recognizing them is like the first step to break it free.
Yeah, so Dr. Goulston says right off the bat that this is incredibly common.
Oh, yeah.
He's seen it in everyone, from like everyday people to CEOs.
Right.
But the interesting thing is he traces a lot of it back to childhood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he thinks that feeling unloved or neglected or
Right.
just not good enough as a kid
Yeah.
can lead to these unhealthy coping mechanisms that we then carry into adulthood.
It makes sense. I mean, those experiences shape who we are.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. We learn to navigate the world based on those early experiences.
Right.
So if those experiences were difficult or like even traumatic, it makes sense that you might develop some strategies that aren't so great in the long run.
Exactly. And, you know, those strategies might work for a little bit,
Right.
but then they can create even bigger problems later on.
Yeah, so let's get into some specifics.
Okay.
The book dives into a lot of different types of self-defeating behaviors. And the first one that really resonated with me was this idea of constantly seeking a parent's approval.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
Yeah.
A lot of adults get stuck in this cycle of wanting love and approval from a parent, even when that parent like maybe hasn't been the most supportive or even been critical.
Right.
You're always trying to earn something that was never given freely.
I mean, that definitely hits home for me.
Yeah.
But, you know, Dr. Goulston suggests like trying to understand the parent's own upbringing, but wouldn't that be like excusing their bad behavior?
It's not about excusing it.
Okay.
It's about understanding it. Like sometimes just having that context can help you break free from that cycle.
Okay.
Instead of being the child who's always seeking approval,
Right.
you become the adult who offers understanding and support.
I see.
And, you know, that can actually lead to a better relationship, even if it's later in life.
Okay, so I see how like a shifting perspective can be really powerful.
Definitely.
But what about relationships that aren't with a parent, but it's with someone else who's just draining you?
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Dr. Goulston talks about getting involved with the wrong people.
It's so easy to do.
And I feel like we've all been there.
We have.
So he highlights two types, and I think they're both super common.
Yeah.
So first, you've got the people who impress you at first with their power or their charisma,
Right.
but they end up just being energy vampires.
Totally.
They take way more than they give.
They suck you dry.
Oh, I've definitely encountered a few of those.
Me too.
And then there's the other type,
Yeah.
those who need so much from you that you end up feeling used.
Right. Like you're constantly having to prop them up.
Yeah, and you get nothing in return.
Exactly.
It's exhausting.
It is.
Dr. Goulston says that these people have like a core of hate or a core of hurt.
Yeah, that's some intense language.
Can you unpack that a little bit?
Sure. So when he says core of hate, he's talking about people who like thrive on conflict. They turn every little disagreement into a battle.
Right.
They always want to make you feel inferior.
I see.
And then the core of hurt types, they're driven by insecurity. They need constant reassurance.
Okay.
And while they might not be intentionally malicious,
Right.
that neediness can be just super draining.
So how do you deal with these types of personalities?
It's all about boundaries.
Okay.
With the hate types, you just have to avoid getting drawn into their power struggles.
Right.
Protect your energy. With the hurt types, you can offer compassion, but you have to recognize that you can't fix them.
Right.
And sometimes, honestly, the best thing you can do is just distance yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about self-preservation.
Exactly.
Now let's move on to something that I think we all struggle with.
Okay.
Procrastination.
Yeah.
I'll admit I can be a master procrastinator.
Lexus too.
But Dr. Goulston's take on it was really surprising.
Really?
Yeah. So he thinks it's not just about laziness.
Okay.
He links it to deeper feelings like loneliness, fear of failure, self-doubt.
Wow. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, he even admits that he struggled with it himself.
He did?
Yeah, while writing this very book.
Interesting.
It wasn't until he found a writing partner that she was able to overcome it.
So you use like the buddy system to fight procrastination.
Yeah, basically.
That's cool.
Having someone to hold him accountable and offer encouragement helped him overcome those feelings of loneliness and self-doubt. It shows the power of connection in breaking these patterns.
That's really inspiring.
And speaking of connections,
Yeah.
he talks about this issue that I think is way too common in relationships. It's this expectation that others should just know how we feel
Oh, yeah.
without us actually saying it.
The classic, if you loved me, you'd know.
Yes.
It never works.
It's a setup for resentment.
It is.
Because guess what? Nobody is a mind reader.
Right.
I've definitely been on both sides of that one.
Me too.
Dr. Goulston says that we need to be more direct with our communication.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it's hard to even know how to articulate those feelings.
I know what you mean.
He offers a really interesting technique for that,
Oh, yeah.
using analogies
Okay.
to help bridge that communication gap.
Interesting.
So he gives this example of a couple who just couldn't understand each other's perspective.
Okay.
The husband was very private. The wife was super social.
Ah, opposites attract.
So to help the husband understand his wife's feelings, Dr. Goulston asked him to imagine how he would feel if his business associates suddenly started acting like his wife's friends.
Wow, that's smart.
Right. So instead of abstractly trying to explain the differences, he put the husband in a situation that would evoke a similar emotional response.
That's brilliant.
And it worked.
It did.
The husband finally understood why his wife was bothered.
Wow.
And it's amazing how a well-chosen analogy can help build empathy.
Totally.
It's so true.
Yeah.
So it seems like a lot of these behaviors stem from just avoiding uncomfortable feelings.
That's a good point.
But Dr. Goulston also talks about the regret of not doing the things that matter most, like spending time with loved ones, pursuing dreams, truly living life to the fullest. It's like we put things off until it's too late.
We do.
He talks about patients on their deathbeds,
Oh, God.
filled with regret for wasting time on things that just didn't matter.
Yeah.
And his point is we don't have to wait for like a tragedy to reevaluate our priorities.
I agree.
He says we should imagine ourselves at age 80, looking back on our lives.
Wow, that's powerful.
Right.
Yeah.
It forces you to confront what truly matters and to make choices that will lead to a sense of fulfillment, not just like fleeting happiness.
I'm getting chills just thinking about it.
Me too. It's a great reminder to live with intention.
Definitely.
So, okay, now on a lighter note,
Okay.
let's talk about anger.
Okay.
I think we've all been there,
Oh, yeah.
where we get so angry that we just make things worse.
We say things we don't mean.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like our rational brain just shuts down.
It does.
Dr. Goulston says that both venting your anger and suppressing it are bad.
Oh, wow.
Venting can damage your relationships,
Mm-hmm.
and suppressing it leads to resentment and can even cause physical problems.
So what's the healthy approach?
He says transform that anger into conviction.
Okay.
So instead of lashing out,
Yeah.
you channel that energy into taking action based on your principles.
I see.
He gives an example of a woman facing gender discrimination at work.
Okay.
Instead of yelling, she calmly addressed the issue
Mm.
and even used humor to disarm her colleagues while still standing up for her rights.
So it's not about denying the anger,
No.
but about using it constructively.
Exactly.
Sometimes the most powerful response is a calm and collected one.
For sure.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So what about when we say yes when we really want to say no?
Well, that's a recipe for resentment.
It is.
Dr. Goulston gives this example of a woman working on a project with a friend,
Okay.
and the friend was really domineering
Mm-hmm.
and took advantage of her inability to say no.
Yeah, it sounds like she was afraid to jeopardize both the project and the friendship.
Right.
But that just breeds resentment.
It does.
And eventually their collaboration blew up.
Ooh.
Yeah. So the takeaway here is that saying no is about protecting your own needs and energy.
It is.
And he suggests this really simple but powerful technique.
Okay, what is it?
Just say stop.
Stop. I
Yeah.
like it.
When you feel like your boundaries are being crossed,
That's great.
and if you do decide to do something that you're not comfortable with,
Yeah.
make it clear that you're doing a favor
Okay.
and that you expect something in return.
Right.
It's about creating a sense of reciprocity in the relationship.
That makes sense.
So, okay, I'm definitely adding stop to my vocabulary.
Me too.
Now, what about holding grudges?
Oh, boy.
I know it's not healthy,
It's not.
but sometimes it feels good to hold on to that anger.
It does.
It's like a little bit of satisfaction.
I know.
But Dr. Goulston says that ultimately it keeps you trapped in negativity.
He's right.
Yeah.
He encourages forgiveness as a path to healing and freedom.
And he's seen patients find peace
He has.
By forgiving themselves and others.
Wow.
Even after, like, deep hurt and betrayal.
That's amazing.
You know, that reminds me of something.
Okay.
Maybe we can circle back to this later.
Okay.
But for now,
Yeah.
what about those times when someone is, like, incredibly generous and you almost feel like you can't refuse?
Right.
Dr. Goulston talks about the hidden expectations, even in generosity.
Interesting.
Yeah, it ties back to that desire for unconditional love, like wanting to believe that people give freely without expecting anything in return.
It'd be nice if it were true.
It would.
But it's not always the case.
He tells the story about a woman whose siblings paid for her graduate studies.
Wow, that's generous.
It was.
Yeah.
But it came with these subtle strings attached.
Oh, no.
She ended up feeling obligated to participate in all the family events
Oh, gosh.
and to offer free advice to everyone.
It's a lot of pressure.
It was.
Yeah.
So even in the most generous acts,
Yeah.
there can be expectations.
It's true.
And it's not about being cynical,
Right.
but about being realistic.
Right.
Recognizing those unspoken dynamics can save you a lot of resentment down the line.
Definitely.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious about something Dr. Goulston talks about.
Okay.
Playing it safe versus going after what you really want.
That's a good one.
I know for me, fear has definitely held me back at times.
Me too.
He compares a fear-driven, look where you're going approach to a desire-driven, go where you're looking mindset.
I like that.
And he uses this example of a successful software designer
Okay.
who became complacent in his career.
Yeah.
He was playing it safe, but it left him feeling unfulfilled.
I see.
He'd lost that spark of creativity and passion that had driven him earlier in his career.
It's so easy to get stuck in a rut
It is.
and just stay in your comfort zone.
Yeah. But the real question is, are you living up to your own expectations?
Ooh, that's deep.
And if not, what changes are you willing to make?
Exactly. Sometimes the most rewarding path is the one less traveled.
That's a great way to put it.
Thanks.
Yeah?
Yeah, and that kind of leads into another pattern that Dr. Goulston talks about.
Okay.
It's this need to always be right.
Oh, yeah, I know that type.
You can't win an argument with them no matter what you do.
It's like they're so focused on proving themselves right that they can't see how it's affecting everyone else.
Right. And it's often rooted in insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're trying to prove their worth by being the smartest person in the room.
But wouldn't acknowledging other people's opinions actually make you seem more confident?
Totally. It shows that you're open to learning
Right?
and that you're not afraid to admit when you're wrong.
Okay, so speaking of relationships,
Yeah.
I think a lot of us can relate to this.
What's that?
Focusing on our partner's flaws instead of appreciating the things they do right.
It's so easy to do.
It is like we're keeping score,
Right.
looking for proof that we're doing more than our fair share.
Exactly.
Dr. Goulston suggests kind of flipping the script.
Oh, how so?
Instead of focusing on their mistakes,
Yeah.
pay attention to their efforts.
Even the small ones.
Right. We all want to feel appreciated.
We do.
But what about when someone keeps breaking their promises?
That's tough.
Is it wrong to feel resentful?
I mean, it's natural to feel let down,
Yeah.
especially if it's a pattern.
Right.
Dr. Goulston says it's important to hold people accountable.
Okay.
Set clear expectations and consequences for broken promises.
It's about teaching people how to treat you.
Exactly.
Sometimes we try to rush making up with someone when we're still angry.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that's really helpful?
I don't know. Dr. Goulston actually tells a story about trying to do that with his wife
Oh, no.
when he was still fuming. It backfired big time.
Really?
Created even more tension.
So maybe that urge to just smooth things over is actually just sweeping things under the rug.
Yeah, you're not really addressing the issue.
All right.
He says it's important to honor your emotions.
Okay.
Take the time to understand why you're angry, communicate clearly, and actually address the underlying problem.
Instead of just putting a Band-Aid on it?
Exactly.
What about when we just assume our partner knows what we need?
Well, that's dangerous.
Is it wrong to expect them to just get us?
I mean, nobody can read minds.
True.
Dr. Goulston talks about how this can lead to resentment and destructive behaviors.
So clear communication is key.
It is.
No more hoping they'll figure it out on their own.
You got to articulate your needs directly and respectfully.
And advocate for yourself.
Exactly.
But what about when it's not about practical needs, but about our feelings?
Those can be even harder to express.
They are. I think a lot of people are afraid to share those.
Yeah, it's that fear of judgment, rejection, the possibility of being abandoned if you reveal too much.
That's a really common fear.
It is, especially in relationships.
He uses this example of a woman who was so focused on making a good impression
Yeah.
that she hid her true self.
It's like she was building walls instead of bridges.
Exactly.
So sad.
He says the key is to be authentic and vulnerable.
Okay.
Trust that the right people will love you for who you are.
Flaws and all.
Flaws and all.
That's easier said than done, though.
It is, but it's worth the risk.
Okay, this next one might surprise you.
What is it? Dr. Goulston says that envy can actually be a powerful motivator.
Envy. Isn't that like a negative emotion?
It can be, but he says instead of letting it consume you,
Yeah.
look at what you envy in others and ask yourself, what steps can I take to achieve something similar?
So turn envy into inspiration.
Exactly. It's not about wishing you had what they have,
Right.
but using it as fuel to create something for yourself.
I love that.
What about when it's not envy, but just feeling sorry for yourself?
Oh, we've all been there.
How do you pull yourself out of that spiral?
Dr. Goulston tells this story about a woman who was stuck in a cycle of self-pity after her divorce.
Okay.
She was so focused on her pain that she couldn't see the possibilities for growth and happiness. It's easy to get tunnel vision when you're hurting.
It is.
He says it's important to shift your perspective.
Okay.
Choose to focus on the positive, even if it's just one small thing.
So it's not about denying the pain, but about finding those glimmers of hope.
Exactly.
Okay, here's a belief that I need to unpack. This idea that the hard way is the right way.
Oh, yeah.
I've definitely fallen into that trap before.
Me too.
Like pushing myself relentlessly even when it made me miserable.
Dr. Goulston challenges that belief.
He does.
Yeah, he says sometimes the easy way out is actually the right way in.
Wow.
He tells a story about this guy in grad school
Okay.
who was pushing himself to the brink, even though he was unhappy.
Mm.
He believed success had to be hard-earned, even if it meant sacrificing his well-being.
I think a lot of people believe that.
They do. It's like we're conditioned to think that if it's not hard, it's not worth it.
But what if it could be both challenging and enjoyable?
Right.
What if you could pursue your passions without grinding yourself down?
That's the dream.
It is.
It's about finding that sweet spot
Yeah.
where effort and enjoyment intersect.
I love that.
So true.
What about when you mess up and hurt someone?
Ooh, that's never fun.
It's saying, I'm sorry enough to
Yeah.
fix things.
Apologies are important,
Yeah.
but actions speak louder than words. Dr. Goulston says you have to take concrete steps to make amends.
So it's not enough to just say the words.
Yeah, no.
You have to show you mean it.
Exactly.
Ask the person what you can do to make things right. Put in the effort to earn back their trust.
Sometimes it takes time,
It does.
but it's essential for rebuilding that relationship.
Speaking of relationships,
Yeah.
I think sometimes I hold back my true feelings,
You do.
especially the tough ones.
Why is that?
It's like I don't want to burden anyone with my problems.
Oh, I get it.
Dr. Goulston talks about this.
He does.
Yeah, he says that holding those feelings in can lead to emotional isolation.
It makes sense.
He shares the story about a woman struggling to cope after her child's accident.
Oh, wow.
She was overwhelmed with guilt and grief, but she was afraid to share her feelings.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. We all need someone to lean on during tough times.
We do.
He says it's important to find those safe and supportive people to talk to.
I agree.
It's not about dumping your problems on others, but about seeking empathy and understanding.
You don't have to go through hard times alone.
That's a really important message.
It is.
What about when we give up on things too quickly?
Oh, yeah. Quitting too soon is another self-defeating behavior.
I've definitely been guilty of that in the past.
You too.
He talks about this talented guy who would start projects with so much enthusiasm, but then he would just abandon them at the first obstacle.
Sounds like he was sabotaging his own success.
It happens more often than you think.
It does.
He says it's important to develop perseverance and a tolerance for boredom.
That's good advice.
It is. The path to success is rarely a straight line.
Oop, it's full of twists and turns.
So it's about embracing the challenges
Yeah.
and seeing setbacks as opportunities for growth.
Oh, I love that.
On the flip side, what about those times when we let others control our lives?
Oh, that's a tough one.
It's like we become puppets dancing to someone else's tune.
It's so easy to fall into that trap.
Especially for people pleasers.
He uses this example of a woman who became so good at pleasing others
Yeah.
that she lost sight of her own desires.
Wow.
She was living according to everyone else's expectations.
That's gotta be exhausting.
It is. And it left her feeling empty.
It's like she gave away her power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And his advice is to set boundaries and learn to say no.
It's about reclaiming your power and making choices that align with your values.
So it's not selfish to prioritize your own needs and well-being?
Not at all.
Good.
It's about recognizing that you have the right to live your life on your own terms.
I like that. I think a lot of us struggle with leaving too much to chance.
Especially with big life decisions.
Yeah,
He talks about this.
he does.
Yeah, it's that fear of taking control, so you just passively let things happen.
Instead of making deliberate choices.
Right. He uses the example of a woman hoping to reconcile with her ex-husband,
Okay.
even though he'd already remarried.
Ouch.
It sounds like she was clinging to a fantasy
Yeah.
instead of facing reality.
So what's the takeaway? He says you have to be proactive and take responsibility for your own happiness.
So no more waiting for things to magically fall into place.
Nope.
Make conscious choices and take action to create the life you want.
This is the only way.
Now let's talk about fear.
Okay.
I think we can all relate to letting fear hold us back at times.
Fear can be paralyzing.
It can.
Dr. Goulston shares this story about a man who was so traumatized by a car accident.
Oh, wow.
He was afraid to drive.
I can't even imagine.
His fear was controlling his life.
Yeah. It can be so debilitating,
Yeah.
that feeling of anxiety and apprehension.
He says the key is to face your fears head on.
I don't know if I could do that.
It's not about being fearless.
Okay.
It's about acting in spite of your fears.
So those butterflies in your stomach
Yeah,
could actually be a sign that you're moving in the right direction.
exactly.
That's a good way to look at it.
It's in those moments of discomfort that we grow the most.
I love that reframing.
Yeah,
What about dealing with loss?
that's a tough one.
How do you move on when it feels like your world has been shattered?
He tells this story about a woman struggling to cope with the death of her daughter.
Oh, gosh.
She was devastated.
I can't imagine.
He emphasizes finding healthy ways to process your grief
Okay.
and gradually re-engage with life.
It's about honoring your loved one's memory
Yeah.
while also allowing yourself to experience joy and create new memories.
It's about finding that balance.
Between honoring the past and embracing the future.
Exactly.
But sometimes it's not about dealing with loss,
Right.
but about recognizing when it's time to walk away from a situation that's no longer serving you.
Yeah, whether it's a relationship, a job, anything.
It can be so hard to let go.
It can.
Dr. Goulston uses this example of a woman staying in a dead-end job.
Okay. Because she was afraid to start over.
That's understandable.
She was settling for mediocrity because it felt safe.
And risking failure.
Right.
I think that's a fear a lot of us share.
It is.
He says you got to listen to your intuition and trust that you deserve better. Okay.
It's not about being impulsive.
Right.
It's about making conscious choices that align with your values and goals.
So sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away
Sometimes it is.
to create space for something better.
Exactly.
Okay, this next one might seem a little counterintuitive.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
He talks about the importance of playing the game,
Playing the game.
even if you don't agree with the rules.
Interesting.
I think he's talking about navigating those unspoken social and professional expectations.
Oh, yeah, those unwritten rules.
Right.
He tells this story about a woman who was struggling to advance in her sales career
Okay.
because she refused to engage in, the expected social niceties.
Her principles were admirable.
They were, but they were holding her back.
So sometimes you have to play the game to win.
It's not about compromising your values.
Yeah.
It's about being strategic.
Okay.
Recognize the rules and learn how to use them to your advantage.
So find that balance between authenticity and strategy. Now, this next one kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier.
What's that?
Putting on an act to make a good impression.
Right, like wearing a mask.
Yeah, to hide your true self.
And that prevents you from forming genuine connections.
It does. He uses the example of a woman who was so focused on pleasing men
Okay.
that she was afraid to show her true personality.
She was dimming her own light.
Her fear of rejection was preventing her from finding a partner who truly appreciated her.
It's so sad.
The message here is to embrace your authentic self.
Right.
Trust that the right people will love you for who you are, flaws and all.
Flaws and all.
So it's about letting go of the need to impress
Yeah.
and allowing yourself to be vulnerable.
It's the only way to connect.
And a big part of that is learning to ask for what you need.
That's a hard one.
It is. A lot of us struggle with that.
We do.
We assume our loved ones should just know what we need.
Right, without us having to say anything.
Exactly.
It talks about this guy who was mad at his girlfriend for not offering him a ride home,
Okay.
even though he never actually told her he needed one.
Classic. It is.
We assume our needs are obvious.
And then we're disappointed when they're not met.
Right.
He says clear communication is essential.
Advocate for yourself.
Yes, it's not about being demanding,
Okay.
but it is about expressing your needs respectfully and assertively.
No more hoping they'll just figure it out on their own.
No.
Okay, now let's talk about something that can be tricky in relationships.
Okay.
Trying to fix other people's feelings.
Oh, yeah. I'm so guilty of that.
Me too. I hate seeing people upset.
I know.
So I try to cheer them up or tell them they shouldn't feel that way.
It's a natural impulse.
It is.
But Dr. Goulston says it can actually be invalidating.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're not allowing them to experience their emotions fully.
Okay.
He says, offer empathy and support,
Mm-hmm.
but don't try to change how they feel.
So sometimes the best thing you could do is just listen.
And be present.
And be present.
Everyone has the right to their own emotions. That's true.
Trying to fix them often does more harm than good.
I see your point.
I think another common trap is seeking certainty before taking action.
Oh, yeah. We want to know everything will be perfect before we make a move.
He talks about this guy who was putting off starting his own law practice
Okay.
because he was afraid of the financial risks.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But he was seeking a level of certainty that just doesn't exist in life.
It's like waiting for all the stars to align.
Exactly.
So what's the antidote to this fear of the unknown?
Embrace uncertainty.
Okay.
Dr. Goulston encourages us to accept that there will always be unknowns and to see those unknowns as part of the adventure.
That's a great way to look at it.
It is.
So it's not about eliminating fear,
No.
but about taking action even when you're afraid.
Exactly. It's about trusting yourself to handle whatever challenges come your way.
Yeah, it can be so tempting to wait for the perfect moment,
Right.
when everything feels safe and certain. But like we've been talking about, that can lead to a lot of missed opportunities.
Definitely. Dr. Goulston actually makes a really good point about this.
Okay.
He says that some anxiety is normal when you're pushing yourself outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
In fact, those butterflies you feel
Right.
could actually be a sign that you're on the right track.
So it's not about being fearless,
Nope.
but about taking action even when you're afraid.
Exactly. He reminds us that even the most successful people experience doubt and uncertainty.
It's true.
It's part of being human.
It is. Earlier when we were talking about forgiveness,
Yeah.
something you said really sparked a memory for me.
Oh, really? What was it?
Well, it's a bit personal,
Okay.
but it ties into this whole idea of self-defeating behaviors.
Okay.
For years, I held on to this grudge against a friend who betrayed my trust.
Oh, wow.
I would just replay the situation over and over in my mind,
Yeah.
letting that anger
I
fester.
feel like you were trapped in this cycle of negativity.
Exactly, and it was exhausting. It wasn't until I made a conscious decision to forgive, not for her, but for myself,
Wow.
that I was finally able to move on.
That's so powerful. Dr. Goulston talks about forgiveness as a path to healing and freedom.
Yeah.
And your story is a perfect example of that.
It really was a game changer for me.
It's not about condoning the other person's action.
Right.
It's about releasing yourself from that burden of resentment.
Yeah, I realized that holding on to that anger was only hurting me.
It's true.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Dr. Goulston's book,
Yeah.
what are some key takeaways that you think listeners should keep in mind?
Well, I think the most important thing is to recognize those patterns in your own life.
Yeah.
Once you see them, you can start to challenge them.
Self-awareness is the first step to change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And be kind to yourself along the way.
Yes.
Don't beat yourself up for past mistakes.
Right.
Just focus on what you can do differently moving forward.
And I think it's also important to remember that change takes time and effort.
It's a journey, not a destination.
So true.
There will be setbacks.
For sure.
But don't let those discourage you.
Right.
Keep practicing those new behaviors, and eventually they'll become second nature.
It's like building a muscle.
Exactly what resonated with you the most from Dr. Goulston's insights.
For me, it was the importance of embracing uncertainty.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that we don't need all the answers before we take action.
We don't.
Sometimes the most rewarding experiences come from stepping outside of our comfort zones.
I agree. And that leads us to a final question for you, the listener.
Okay.
What kind of self-defeating behavior do you think you might want to work on?
And what's one small step you can take today to start moving in a new direction?
Remember, sometimes the easy way out is actually the right way. And the right